So, thank you for being here once again. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. As you know, we're going through quite a lot, a voluminous number of letters written by Nichiren Daishonin as the great scholar of his day, and really since, in the proper and complete practice of Buddhism and its ultimate teachings of the Lotus Sutra. Now, amongst these thousands of extant documents, several stand out for their scholarship and in different ways, and some of them as tools of debate, like his remonstrations with the government to try to straighten out the state of affairs amongst several different schools and influences, and bringing everything back to center. This has happened cyclically, as we've discussed, with Tendai, Nagarjuna, Miaolo, Dengyo, so on. And then there are those letters that he's written that are specifically meant to be shared amongst his followers, those people he's influencing, his Sangha, or the Sangha, of which he is the leader. And then there are personal advice and letters, right? So among those letters that are more like treatises, meant to be shared amongst the Sangha, that explain the proper attitude, the proper intent, the proper method of practice, and point to, if you will, the different stages that one would experience from beginner to intermediate to advanced, so on. This is one of those Gosho. This was a letter meant to be shared and read aloud and discussed amongst all of the students of Nichiren's elucidation of the Lotus Sutra. And as such, a lot of questions that are intimate, that you and I also have, are directly addressed. So you can tell from the title a bit of what we're going to discuss here. The title of this Gosho is On the 4 Stages of Resolve, or Resolute Mind, and the 5 Stages of Practice. So right off the bat, that answers one question that you may have in your mind, or certainly will hear from others who begin in this practice. What do I have to do? What's the first thing I have to master? What's the ultimate version of doing this? How do I grow through this practice? Is this all it is? Is there something else to look forward to? So on and so forth. The question is, we're always curious as to human beings, as to, are we doing it right? Are we doing it enough? Is there something I should expect to indicate the stage I am? How close am I to realizing my Buddha nature? Questions of that sort. So this is an important Gosho in that respect. This is certainly a tool that you and I can use amongst those that are curious around us, that may ask us these kinds of questions. So now that I've introduced it that way, let's just get into it and see what we might discover together. So the first thing is that he thanks, as we've discussed before, this communication thing is this long, arduous journey of a messenger getting to Nichiren, Nichiren entertaining those messengers and their entourage for a few days or a week or whatever the weather permits and time permits for him to be able to write a response. Sometimes he doesn't write the response right away. Sometimes it's a more considered thing, and it just goes out to a messenger who has connections to a broader leader amongst the people. Like you hear, this is to Toki Jonin, a response to Toki Jonin. And there are these, Shijo Kingo. There are others who are maybe not secular monks, but temple monks. So to them, he usually includes more than just a thank you for what you sent me. Here's something to be shared amongst the Sangha, right? So this is one of those letters. This is a response to Toki Jonin for some offerings and things that he received from him. Toki took the opportunity to ask some questions, sent them with the messenger along with these offerings, and Nichiren is now taking the opportunity not only to respond to Toki Jonin, but to respond to his requests for information in a way that he can share with the Sangha in his area. So he starts out, I have received the string of blue duck coins that you sent. Scholars of Buddhism these days all agree on the following. Whether in the Buddha's lifetime or after his passing, those who wish to practice the Lotus Sutra must devote themselves to the 3 types of learning. If they neglect any one of these, they cannot attain the Buddha way. So I'll let you think about what those 3, we've talked about them in many ways, but so this, you can already see, is going to be a very intimate look at Nichiren's prescriptions for how to practice Myoho Renge Kyo. So it's very relevant to us today. In the past, I too subscribed to this opinion. Setting aside here the sacred teachings of the Buddha's lifetime as a whole, let us examine the question in the light of the Lotus Sutra, Myoho Renge Kyo. Here, too, we may set aside the teachings contained in the preparation and revelation sections. That brings us to the transmission section, which constitutes a clear mirror for the latter day of the law and is most to be relied upon in determining this matter. The transmission section has 2 parts. The first is that of the theoretical teaching and consists of the 5 chapters beginning with the Teacher of the Law chapter. The second is that of the essential teaching and consists of the latter part of the Distinctions and Benefits chapter through the 11 chapters that comprise the remainder of the sutra. The 5 chapters from the theoretical teaching and the 11.5 chapters from the essential teaching combine to make 16.5 chapters, and in these it is clearly explained how one should practice the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law. If this is not convincing enough, then further examining the matter in light of the Universal Worthy and Nirvana Sutras will surely leave no doubt. So once again, the Nirvana Sutra is a supporting document, the Buddha's last words concerning his ultimate teachings of Myoho Renge Kyo, the Lotus Sutra. Within these chapters of transmission, the 4 stages of a resolute mind and the 5 stages of practice expounded in the Distinctions and Benefits chapter refers to what is most important in the practice of the Lotus Sutra and are a standard for those living in the time of the Buddha after his passing. So you could stop right there. You could just go back to your copy of the Lotus Sutra, whatever translation you're using, look for, and in different translations the chapter titles might differ, but the Distinction and Benefits chapter will have something, it'll either say benefits or merits or rewards, and enumerating the different differentiations of them. So I don't have a list of all the titles in front of me, but if you go to my playlist on the Lotus Sutra, I use several copies, several translations of the Lotus Sutra to talk about all of these chapters. So you could start study right there and read through those and see what they say. But let's see what Nichiren has to say about those chapters. Chi Sing writes, to produce even a single moment of belief and understanding represents the beginning in the practice of the essential teachings. So belief. It's a weird word. What I would say is the intent of that statement is when you get a spark of insight, when as you read a chapter, a sentence within the Lotus Sutra, the essential teachings, and you get an aha moment, or you get, oh, I know what that means. Something relatable to your own experience of life. That moment, you could call that belief, you could call that aha, you could call that insight, you could call it many things. But the point is, whatever you read in that moment, that whether it's a word, a sentence, a paragraph, or an entire chapter, and you think, I think I get this. I get, wow. And you focus on that for a moment, that is the practice. That is the most significant moment of you becoming aware, becoming awakened to your Buddha nature. So pay attention to that. The more you read, the more you study, the more of those moments you will have. The more they pile on one another, the more overwhelming it becomes. Your life experience changes in ways you can't even see yet, but you will. Because once you have that knowledge, once you have that insight, it continuously up. It's just like when you say things like, well, I saw an old Volkswagen Bug the other day. Now I seem to see him everywhere, right? It's a consciousness opening experience. Of these various stages, the 4 stages of a resolute mind are intended for those living in the Buddha's lifetime, and the 5 stages of practice for those living after his passing. Among these, the first of the 4 stages of a resolute mind is that of producing even a single moment of belief and understanding. See, again, I might want to use a different word than belief, but it's an insight, because that's what produces understanding, right? And I would argue that understanding is a personal experience of life. This is why Shakyamuni used words like incalculable, innumerous, because there's innumerous human experiences. So to account for all of them, you need to teach in a way that produces insights individually in each of those people. That's unfathomable, but fathomable to each one of us. Does that make sense? Your experience is yours uniquely. You can share that experience with many, and they will all relate to that experience in their own way. The experience is similar. The experience individually is unique. Many in body, one in mind. Itai Doshin, right? And the first of the 5 stages of practice is that of rejoicing on hearing the Lotus Sutra. And I would say to you that that deepens with time. When you first encounter the Lotus Sutra, it's exciting. The more you learn, the more insights you have, the more aha moments you have, the more when you come to practice, when you come to the Lotus Sutra, when you come to chant Myoho Renge Kyo, your experience of it, your appreciation of it broadens, deepens, grows, right? Just like when you fall in love with someone, or your first experience is overwhelming, it's amazing. Over time, you become accustomed to having that overwhelming experience, and it doesn't overwhelm you anymore in the same way. It's not a momentary overwhelming. It's a grandeur of overwhelming. And it deepens, right? These 2 stages together are the treasure chest of the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors and of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. They are the gate from which all Buddhas of the 10 directions and the 3 existences emerge. So this is another way of saying the same thing. They motivate you to experience more. But the first thing you have to do is get insight, and then use those insight to develop understanding. And with those two initial things happening, you enter into your practice. The two sage and worthy teachers, Tendai and Miao Lo, established these two initial stages of a resolute mind and practice, and put forth the three interpretations concerning them. One equates them with the stage of resemblance to enlightenment, the 10 stages of a resolute mind, and the stage of the iron-wheeled turning king. The second equates them with the first of the 5 stages of practice, which are identified with the stage of perception and action, at which one has not yet severed the illusions of thought and desire. And the third equates them with the stage of hearing the name and words of the truth, the voice hearers, the deeper meaning, the understanding part, right? In reconciling these differences of interpretation, Great Concentration and Insight states, quote, "The Buddha's intentions are difficult to determine. He explained things differently according to the differing capacities of his listeners. If only we understand this, then what need is there for troublesome dispute?" In other words, there was a tendency, and there may be in your life or in your Sangha, for people to say, well, the first, or this sutra says this, but that sutra says that. Which one's right? That would be an ignorant question. In other words, ignorant because one fails to understand the order of teachings, and that teaching to one person differs from teaching to another person because of their experience of life. The way we would teach mathematics to a 6-month-old baby versus a 20-year-old woman is different because their life conditions are different. That doesn't mean that the teachings are fighting one another. You see? It's not that one is prior or better than the other. It's that they're different according to the people's capacity. So, in other words, to understand and find meaning is to stop trying to find differences, because that's what our samsaric human mind does, try to identify everything that's different, but accumulate those teachings and try to see where they're leading, where they all are going, what is the shared path in these, on the surface, different looking things are all, both, or many, trying to evolve to the same understanding. Try to find the connective tissue rather than the separating spaces. So that's really good guidance for study, right? My opinion, this is Nichiren, my opinion is that of the 3 interpretations, the one that refers to hearing the name and words of the truth accords best with the text of the Lotus Sutra. For in describing the first of the 5 stages of practice that apply to the time after the Buddha's passing, the sutra speaks of those who, quote, "hear this sutra and do not slander or speak ill of it, but feel joy in their hearts," end quote. If one equates the stage described here with a level of as advanced as the 5 stages of practice at the stage of resemblance to enlightenment, then the words, quote, "do not slander or speak ill of it," would hardly be appropriate. So what does he mean there? It means that if you're still looking at the teachings as though they're disparate and different, and you're not sure which one to follow because you've made these distinctions, then you certainly couldn't be near the stage of enlightenment, resembling enlightenment. You're still in confusion. Do you see what he's saying? In particular, the passage in the lifespan chapter that speaks of those who are, quote, out of their minds, end quote, and those who are, quote, not out of their minds, end quote, refer in both cases to the stage of hearing the name and words of the truth. The Nirvana Sutra says, quote, whether they have a resolute mind or do not have a resolute mind, and, quote, if there are living beings who, in the presence of Buddhas numerous as the sands of the Hiranyavati river, have conceived the desire for enlightenment, then when they are born in an evil, unlife-affirming, or negative age such as this, they will be able to accept and uphold the sutra like this and will never slander it, end quote. One should also consider these passages. So that's really about being ready to awaken enlightenment rather than being critical of the words. Once again, and Shakyamuni spoke about this quite lengthily in the Lankavatara when he was being questioned over and over and over again. The same question, just differently dissecting the words. Shakyamuni finally got kind of fed up and said, look, you need to stop trying to dissect every single word and just back off and see what the words are about. Look for the meaning. That will come to you squarely in your experience. Yeah, I just watched a program that was mentioned the study of language through cultures and through time. And that, you know, if you think about this, you don't have to think too hard about this to understand that the words that I use in English to describe an experience come with a tremendous amount of inculcated meaning. Certainly for me, which might be different from you, even though we both speak English. But in the greater sense, American English sees the world through a different mechanism of illustration through language. And American English has that worldview built into it. And so if you learn American English and you learn Buddhism through American English, you will come to the enlightenment or meaning of Buddhism through a particular worldview. Now, you can dissect that down to the individual, but think of it in larger terms. If the language you use is pictographs like cuneiform or Chinese Mandarin with those constructed characters, those characters themselves are built from real world things. Talk about attachment. But, I mean, not that one is better than the other, but just understand that the way a Chinese person sees the world, simply because of the construct of their language, appears different. Their experience, although we're both humans, and if I speak in my native language of French, the way I construct a sentence is a different perception of the world. Do you see? So, if you study Buddhism by comparing words, you will be endlessly stuck. And repeatedly throughout the sutras, throughout Gosho's writings, we hear of the persons of learning and realization, the voice hearers, the Pratyeka Buddhas, the Shakyas. These easily become Ichantikas, people of incorrigible disbelief. They have this tremendous obstacle because of their voracious appetite for the words. Look at Hinayana texts, the words of the Buddha, the words of the sermons. They're so attached to the words. And there's a lot to be learned by reading the words. But you cut off your learning, you cut off your experience of Buddhahood by not getting beyond that. It's not the words that are important. It's the meaning, the understanding, the teaching, the representation the words are trying to define, which is the actual learning of the Buddhist method and enlightenment. But that's our difficulty as samsaric beings, is that our entire thinking mechanism is based on distinctions, defining separateness, putting things into a box, putting that over there and that over there, rather than seeing the undercurrent, seeing the amazing thing about it. Have you ever stood next to where there's, I guess you could do this in a city as well, where you change your perspective. You go to a lake or a mountain, or go hiking, go to some place that's different than what you normally experience. And look around you at all the different thingness, and then look inward and feel your heart, feel your breathing, feel the air. Feel that moment when you look around and you just take it in. Maybe the grandeur of a canyon, or the hillside, or the sheer beauty, right? Statements like that. Then you will understand that it isn't that particular pine tree. It isn't that particular rock. It isn't that particular stream, or the squirrel that flew from one tree to another, or the sound of the many birds and species, or the way the forest floor cushions your footfalls. All those things are there, and they're amazing. But your sense of being there, that's something you'll never forget. That's something that when you go back to your day-to-day environment, you will recall, well, that feeling, that inner something that calls back to that experience. You won't remember any specific, you may remember a specific tree, but highly doubtful. What my point is like all of those things are like the words of Buddhism. But if you can take a moment as you read the words, when you get those insights, those aha moments, that's when you'll feel that grandeur of what it is you're experiencing. That's the key to your Buddhist practice. So, where are we? Whether they have a resolute mind or do not have a resolute mind. If living beings who are in the presence of Buddhas, numerous as the sands of Hiranyavati river, have conceived the desire for enlightenment. That's an interesting set of words, right? But when you're reading, when you're chanting, when you're practicing Buddhism, when you have that moment of going, there's a motive force here. I feel this motion, this kinetic energy in my life. You don't even have to know where you're going. You just feel the motion of it. Along with the motion comes motivation. Another set of words. But do you know what I'm saying? It's a welling up, isn't it? Then, when they are born in an evil age such as this, in other words, when you have that motivations and then you enter the world of the mundane world of samsara, they will be able to accept and uphold a sutra like this and will never slander it, because the difference of that motive force you feel when you're chanting, when you're studying, and when you're in the normal world is quite stark. You recognize the difference. And with that recognition comes a sort of a deep respect and an abiding, a love for that motion of Buddha nature, that assimilation of Buddha wisdom. It becomes very special in light of the normal world. It's very unique. One should always consider these passages. Again, in the four-character phrase, quote, a single moment of belief and understanding, the word belief applies to the first of the four stages of a resolute mind, when you first get that insight. And the word understanding to those that follow. So that insight is what then allows you to perceive the rest of the words in that light of that insight. And if this is so, then a resolute mind without understanding would apply to the first of the four stages of a resolute mind. The second stage of a resolute mind is described in the sutra as that at which one, quote, generally understands the import of the words. Right? You transcend the words and you start to gather that it's the meaning of the words where I find my experience toward my enlightenment, toward my deeper understanding of the meaning and what this is about of the sutra. And in volume 9 of the annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, we read, quote, the initial stage of a resolute mind is different from the others, because in the initial stage, there is as yet no understanding. There's just this, again, that aha moment, that insight that, oh, I almost instantly the desire to read more because I'm getting it. I see there's something here, right? That inspired moment. Then we come to the following responding with joy chapter, where the initial stage of rejoicing on hearing the Lotus Sutra is restated and clarified in terms of 50 persons who in turn hear and rejoice in the Lotus Sutra, the merit that they gain, thereby decreasing with each successive person. With regard to the stage achieved by the 50th person, there are two interpretations. The first interpretation holds that the 50th person falls within the stage of rejoicing on hearing the Lotus Sutra. The other interpretation holds that the 50th person cannot yet be said to have entered the stage of rejoicing on hearing the Lotus Sutra, but is still at the stage of hearing the name and words of the truth. So, this is the story you may recall in the Lotus Sutra on telling other people, the Bodhisattva practice, telling other people on this practice of Myoho Renge-kyo. And that person tells another person, and that person tells another person. And this analogy is used in the West and East for millennia, right? But it's in the West, we normally hear it as, and I told two people, and they told two people, because we think in pyramids, right? But in the Lotus Sutra, it's just about telling somebody, and then they sharing that excitement and telling somebody on down to the 50th person. It's not that 50 is an exact number. It's an illustration of how removed your words are from those who may hear it. And there are two interpretations. The person, that 50th person who hears it, may immediately get insight and go, wow, I want to do that. I want to find out more. Or they're awakened to Buddhism. That's interesting. So in varying degrees, even to the 50th person, it will affect their worldview, their thinking, right? In varying degrees. Again, in Buddhism, always varying degrees, allowing for people experiencing the world uniquely. This is what one commentary means when it says, quote, "The truer the teachings, the lower the stage of those it can bring to enlightenment." Thus, for example, the perfect teaching can save people of lower capacity than can the doctrines of the four flavors and the three teachings. Similarly, the Lotus Sutra can save people of lower capacity than can the perfect teachings expounded prior to the Lotus Sutra, and essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra can save more people than can the theoretical teaching. People of any capacity at all. One should carefully ponder the six-character phrase, "The truer the teaching, the lower the stage." So now, because this is starting to get a little bit meaty, Nichiren's going to shift into his question and answer method. But that was an interesting little foray there, and it's just to recap that paragraph. If you've never I'm going to use math again, okay? Or let's use English. If you're learning English, if you're not born speaking English, and I come to you and I say, okay, we're going to write an outline to create a table of contents for a treatise on, the life of frogs in the winter. And compositionally, I want you to give me a beginning, middle, and end. I want you to develop a theme, and I want you to stay away from similes and gravitate more toward research, validated research, and build a bibliography based on that research. Now, if you've never studied English or learned English, and I come to you with that requisite, how likely is it that you're going to be able to learn English so that you can write this treatise I'm asking you to write? It's pretty unlikely. There may be some among you who have enough outside knowledge or cursory experience with English that you'll glean something of what I'm saying and you'll be able to produce something. But for the most part, I'm going to get a lot of lost stares, right? However, if I teach the alphabet, I'm much more likely to have a greater number of students who've never spoken English before to go A, B, C, D, and get it, right? So that's what that's about. If I teach you the most elevated teaching about something you've never experienced before, it's going to be difficult for you to follow along. But if I start very basic, then I can reach a lot more people and get them on board. So this teaching, this six-character phrase, he's saying, the truer the teaching, the lower the stage, that's what that's about. So here's the question. Where are we time-wise? Okay, we can go a little further. Let's do a question and answer, and then we'll take a pause. In the latter day of the law, this is a question, is it necessary for beginners in the practice of the Lotus Sutra to devote themselves to all three types of learning associated with the perfect teaching? Answer. This is a very important question, and so I will be consulting the text of the sutra in answering you. In describing the first, second, and third of the 5 stages of practice, the Buddha restricts those at these stages from practicing precepts and meditation and places all emphasis on the single factor of wisdom. So you see where study is primary. And I've said this many, many times. Some of you have argued with me. That's okay. But this is the Buddha's words. And because our wisdom is inadequate, he teaches us to substitute a resolute mind for wisdom. In other words, you can't possibly understand the full teachings right away. It comes with time. It comes with developing your curiosity, your practice, your resolve. Because in order to have a resolve, a resolute mind, our samsaric mind needs to be fed. It needs to be fed with understanding. And understanding comes from reading words, reading these stories, these analyses, so that we can start to disassemble our complicated mental processes. And then things start to click. Things start to fall into place. Our understanding grows, our wisdom. And that grows our resolve, right? The more wisdom we get about something, the more we feel attached to it, ironically. Making this single word, a resolute mind, the foundation. Disbelief is the cause for becoming an ichantika and for slander of the law, while a resolute mind is the cause for wisdom and corresponds to the stage of hearing the names and words of the truth. So that indicates an attitude, doesn't it? It's not just about collecting words and getting insights. It is that the insights create a foundation for those who want to get the meaning. That's what words of the truth means. The names and words of the truth is that you see beyond the words to what the meaning is. Tendai states, quote, when persons have reached a stage of resemblance to enlightenment, the benefits they have accrued, or the merits or rewards, will not be forgotten when they are reborn in another existence. In other words, you'll transfer this awakening to your next moment. Your life has, your momentum has changed, has been altered. Your wisdom grows from moment to moment, right? Our life goes moment to moment, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. So when in this moment we achieve insight, we start to hear the meaning in the teachings, we carry that impetus, that momentum into the next moment. We're born into it. And our goal is to be born into it with each successive moment. But for persons at the stage of hearing the name and words of the truth, or at the stage of perception and action, those benefits will be forgotten when they're reborn in succeeding existences. Though there may be some among them who do not forget, even in the case of persons who have forgotten those benefits, if they should encounter a good friend, then the roots of goodness that they have planted in their previous existence will be revived. So this is a caution that even though for a moment you may start to understand these teachings, if in the next moment you hang around with negative influences, you'll easily forget what you've experienced because you haven't done it long enough. You haven't inculcated it into at a cellular level, right? It's only at an ethereal level. It's in your mind. It has to become cellular for our samsaric minds to retain it. And the influences around us support or take us away from that. And in Buddhism, someone who takes us away from that practice would be called an evil friend. Not because they grow horns and spit fire, but because they're distracting us, our easily distracted human mind. We need to be careful of the influences around us, because if they take us away from our enlightenment, that's not good. So we need nurturing. They don't need to be bodhisattvas. They just need to be nurturing of our better selves. And then that inculcates further what we've discovered, our wisdom. If they encounter an evil friend, there it is, they will lose their true mind. Right? That makes sense now, right? This is probably what happened to the two eminent men of these Middle Ages, the great teacher Jikaku and Chisho of the Tendai school. They were Tendai monks. They knew Lotus Sutra was supreme. And yet, they fell upon evil friends, teachers who misguided them, and they forgot all about it. They were monks. They were studied. even with that much wisdom, evil friends cultivated their avarice for power and money, and they dropped their beliefs, their true minds, for earthly pleasures, money and fame. They turned their backs upon the teachings of Tendai and Dengyo, who had been good friends to them, and instead transferred their allegiances to Shanwu Wei, Pukung, and others who were unlife-affirming, negative, evil friends. And many of the scholars in the latter age have been deluded by Eshin's introduction to his Essentials of Rebirth into Pure Land, and have as a result lost the true mind of a resolute mind in the Lotus Sutra, giving their allegiance instead to the provisional teachings associated with Amida. They are persons who have abandoned a great doctrine and instead chosen lesser doctrines. If we judge from examples in the past, they will probably suffer for countless kalpas in the three evil paths. It is persons such as these that Tendai meant when he said, quote, "If they encounter an evil friend, they will lose their true mind." So, before the next question, we'll take a pause. There's a lot there to ponder. This is a really good gosho for, I would say, any time in your practice as a reminder, but certainly a good tool to remind us that when we get somebody new in our circles who's curious about Nichiren or Lotus Sutra Buddhism, that we understand with compassion where they're at and how much work they need in order to guide them into the adulthood of Buddhist practice, right? When they first come to us, whatever their age, they're little babies. They're curious. They want to know everything. They're grabbing at everything. They want to put it into them, right? Like a baby puts everything in its mouth. But we also know there's going to be times when this baby has a rash, when it gets colic, when it can't sleep at night. Then we have to nurture them through until they can make their own PB&J. Okay, so with that silly analogy, I will leave you until the next one. I'm really enjoying this gosho. I'm wanting to make an individual writing of it just as a great reminder. Also a great introduction into how to research and dig into the wisdom of the sutras and the writings. So it's quite a gosho, one to share amongst one another, or share this video. Get a gosho video party going, so that you can pause the video and discuss amongst one another. And what's he going to say about this? Wow, that was an interesting vision. That would be interesting to be a part of. Maybe one day I'll be able to visit one of your homes, and you could gather some friends and we could have that kind of a live discussion. That would be amazing. But to the degree that we can do that with these videos, I'm very thankful that you're here. I'm thankful for your support. Thank you so much for that. Please take care of your health and those around you. Be kind and strengthen your practice. There's always more study. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I'll see you in the next one.